Welcome to the Blooming Wand podcast. I'm Emily O'Neill, evidential psychic medium, intuitive healer, and coach. Here on this podcast, I guide you on a journey of self reflection using the wisdom of the tarot. As the moon waxes and wanes, so do our own inner tides. And as a way to honor moon cycles and life cycles, on each full and new moon, I pull 3 cards which inspire an intention and affirmation to illuminate your path. Think of them as themes to guide you as you move through coming days. So grab your journals, light a candle, and settle into the present moment. Let's delve into the enchanting archetypes of the tarot, uncovering the magic and messages they hold for all of us. Now, before we dive into this moon cycle's intention and affirmation, I want to quickly mention that I've got a few spaces open for my one-on-one mentoring program. And let me tell you really quick just a bit about it. Now, I believe that we're all born with an intuitive connection to the unseen world, a realm of energy and spirit that influences our lives in profound ways. And I believe this connection fosters a sense of wholeness, belonging, and guidance. However, life's experiences, trauma, and societal conditioning can veil this inner knowing, and this is where I come in. As your mentor, I'll guide you on a transformative journey of self-discovery using a unique blend of evidential mediumship, psychic connection, tarot, symbolic imagery, personal development tools, and more. And we're going to work together to reconnect you with your intuition and unlock the wisdom that you hold within. In a safe and supportive space, you'll cultivate a deeper understanding of yourself, overcome limiting beliefs, and ultimately live a life guided by your inner light. If you're interested, I'd invite you to book a discovery call today via bloomingwand.com, and we can go over the program in more detail and just I can answer any questions that you have. And I just want to put this out there because I don't know if everybody realizes this. There's really no formal certification process for intuitive healers, evidential psychic mediums, and, people like me. But I want you to know that I take my development and your well-being very seriously. And I'm a lifelong learner, and I've dove into a lot of different things to make sure that I provide a high level of service to all of my clients. And if you're interested in reading more about that, again, it's all on the website in the About Me section. So just a few things, though, to point out is I have a BA in history. I love history, anthropology, archaeology, anything like that. I still read a lot about on those topics today. I've also studied fine art. I took Daniel Four's ancestral medicine coursework, so ancestral medicine is a pillar of what I offer to my clients if that's something that you're interested in. I have a life coaching certification, and I've had 3 years of training at the Oak Bridge Institute, which is basically an institute that's on a mission to raise the standard of care in the realms of psychism and mediumship. So just pointing out that we want to be careful about the practitioners that we work with. This is why I always allow or want people to book discovery calls with me. I want it to make sure that it's a good fit. I think it's fair for people to ask questions, so don't be shy. Shoot me an email, book a discovery call. Let's chat. I've got about 4 spaces left for my mentoring program beginning. It can begin whenever you want, but I like to start it in September because the autumn equinox is in September, and then we get to work from the equinox to the solstice, and I just really think aligning things with the cycles of nature is potent, magical, powerful, yummy, all of those things. Moving on to our new moon intention and affirmation. You know the drill. The new moon is upon us, so I have a new tarot curated intention and affirmation for us to work with. This moon cycle, I used my Smith Waite tarot deck, and we pulled the Queen of Cups, the Tower, and the King of Wands. Be sure to have a look at the cards to see what they awaken in you. You can do so by going to bloomingwand.com, click Explore, go to the blog, and you're going to see a full transcript of this podcast there. I always post the transcripts on the website because I usually have journaling prompts and just other things that you might want to have a quick reference to. So don't forget to take a look over there because you'll probably find some resources that are helpful to you. Here's our intention. Have you ever felt empowered and confident only to become riddled with a sense of inner conflict? Yeah, me too. Sometimes we feel a pressure to perform, achieve, and accomplish. We know we have the skill and ability to do the things we know we want to do, but inner conflict undermines our sense of surety. Man, I can think of so many times where I felt like, yeah, I know I have the skill and ability to do X, Y, Z, but then there's this like inner conflict that comes up within me that there's a part of me that's like, you can't do that, and another part of me is like, yes, you can. And then it causes stress, right? I would describe it as a sense of mounting pressure rises, and we know if we don't sit with the parts of ourselves that are in conflict, we're gonna have a meltdown. And look, meltdowns aren't necessarily a bad thing, but I think sometimes we find ourselves having one and are like, where's this coming from? Maybe it's because you were having some inner conflict. I don't know. Here's your affirmation. I can hold space for opposing needs and desires. So, key indicators of internal conflict that I experience and what you experience could be very, very different. But this is just what I've noticed when I'm having internal conflict. I experience fatigue, exhaustion, digestive issues, headaches, tension or aches and pains in various parts of my body, repeating thoughts. I begin to ruminate. Rumination is usually a big one for me. And there are other things that happen, but we'll just start with that because it's already a lot. So, how about you? How do you know when an inner conflict is brewing? And I ask because recognizing internal conflict is the first step towards resolving it. So, it's helpful to know, like, oh, I've got different parts of myself that are speaking really loudly in my inner world, and I need to address that. The combination of the Queen of Cups and the King of Wands, which represent opposing elements of water and fire, is an invitation to strive for a balance between your drive and your emotional well being. The Tower suggests that this conflict is a catalyst for personal growth and transformation. So let's explore each card, beginning with the Queen of Cups. So when I look at this card, I see a figure seated on a throne at the edge of a shoreline. The throne looks like it's made of stone. It has a shell on the top of it, and the little figures that are on the throne look like kind of like cherub mermaid or mermaid babies or something like that. And when I look at the figure, they're intently looking at a very elaborate cup that is closed. So all the other cups in the Smith Waite deck are not this elaborate. They're open, you can see into them, but not this one, which I think is kind of interesting. The figure's foot is kind of flowing into the water, and the water looks very ripply, so things are rippling out. And this kind of flowy water ripple look is also on the figure's cloak, which makes me feel like they're connected to moon cycles, they're connected to the flow of water and the tides. It makes me feel like they know that emotions, like the tides, flux and flow. It makes me feel like they're connected to their intuitive and emotional self and that they're willing to kind of ride the ebb and flow of their intuitive and emotional self because the reality is we're not the same every day. And we have different emotions that run through our system depending on how we wake up, what's going on in our lives, etc., etc. And I feel like the Queen of Cups is very well aware of that. Now, this is an archetype that is nurturing and compassionate, and they represent emotional intelligence, intuition, and a deep connection to your feelings. This card suggests that you have a strong ability to empathize with others and understand their emotions as well as your own. This card represents your nurturing and compassionate side, and it suggests that even during conflict, you're capable of empathy and understanding. Moving on to the second archetype, which is the Tower, and let's face it, nobody wants to see the Tower in a reading because it's one of the more intense cards. Just by looking at it, you can tell. So when I look at it, I see a thunderbolt that really looks like a yellow arrow, blasting into the top of a tower, and flames are erupting from the tower, and a crown is falling off the top of the tower. So that makes me feel like there's some kind of spiritual or intellectual knowing happening here. Two figures are being flung from the tower. The background is black. There are white clouds. It could be smoke. It could be clouds. I don't know. Doesn't matter. The intensity is the same. So the tower is a dramatic card that often signifies unexpected upheaval, and it can represent a loss, a breakdown, or a major change. However, the tower is a card of transformation and growth. If we don't have the shedding, the breakdown, the realizations, the awakening, we can't transform. I mean, these things kind of go hand in hand, right? So I want to remind you that the upheaval that comes with the tower can lead to a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you. It can help us course correct, actually. And in the context of this reading, it represents the mounting pressure we feel when parts of ourselves are in conflict. Now let's move on to the third and final archetype, which is the King of Wands. So when I look at this card, I see a figure seated on a throne. The throne is very different than the Queen of Cups throne. There are salamanders and lions on the throne. There are salamanders all over the cloak of this figure, and they do have, like, it looks like a lion head necklace. Everything about their clothes screams kind of flame and fire energy. There's a salamander at their feet. And so when I think about salamanders, I feel like they represent magic and transformation. Just think about how they appear in nature. They blend right in. They're amazing survivors. They love cool, damp, moist places, and they pop out of nowhere and surprise us a lot of times, which is why I've always felt they were kind of magical. Lions can mean different things to different people, but to me, they mean, I think of like Leo energy. I think bold, um, extroverted, energetic, um, probably well adorned, things like that. Now, when I look at this figure, it looks like they're looking at something that extends beyond what we can see on the card itself, and that they're about ready to like stand up and take action. So I think that's an important vibe of the King of Wands. It's an archetype of action. So the King of Wands is a powerful and charismatic figure that represents leadership, action, and creativity. This is an archetype that knows how to balance intuition and logic. And this card suggests that you have the potential to take charge, inspire others, and bring your ideas to life. Now, the King of Wands is a strong and confident leader, and so are you. So remember, leadership can be something we offer to others, but it's something that we can offer to ourselves. In the wellness industry, this is often referred to as self leadership. And I just want to point out that in the context of this reading, you were talking about inner conflict because we've got the Tower where there's some upheaval occurring. We've got the Queen of Cups, which is an intuitive and an emotional and an attentive archetype. And we have this King of Wands that's like wanting to go, wanting to take action. And when we have that happening within us, right, this desire to like, I'm confident, I know what I need to do, I want to take action, but then these other parts of ourselves that are feeling more emotional, maybe shy, maybe afraid to take that action, we can feel that tension and we can feel that inner upheaval. So let's figure out how we can conquer inner conflict and become our own self leader. So self leadership is about fostering harmony and cooperation among the various parts of your inner system. It's about being the wise and compassionate leader of your own internal world. So self leadership requires, guess what? Self reflection and awareness, which usually requires some quiet time, right? Some quiet time alone to be present for whatever is going on within you. Let's talk about how self leadership can help you navigate inner conflict. So, the first thing I always do is I identify the parts of myself that are in conflict. And so, the example we're using for this, based off the cards that we pulled, are this desire to take action and this other part that's feeling really emotional about the things we need to do. So, we've got just do it already, and then another part of ourselves that's like, but I'm scared. I have emotions about this. Maybe I'm not good enough. And that can create tension within. So identify the conflicting parts and recognize the different voices or perspectives within you that are at odds. And you can even give them names. Like one of my favorite parts is that I have that tends to be like, I don't know, kind of emotional and reclusive is emo Emily. And I know when emo Emily is around because I want to be alone, things. I want to listen to sad music, stuff like that. So get comfortable and familiar with being able to identify the different parts of yourself because we're a kaleidoscope of experiences and perspectives. We're not one dimensional. Human beings are not one thing. We're so much more than that. The next thing I want to offer is that it's really helpful to validate and soothe our parts when they're in conflict. So we want to acknowledge the pain and experiences that may be driving these conflicting parts and offer compassion and support for each part. And the third thing is finding common ground. We want to explore underlying desires or goals that both parts might have and seek ways for them to work together towards a shared objective. And I feel like this is where it can get kind of tricky to do this work on our own. It is possible, but this might be an area where you're like, I don't think these conflicting parts have any common ground. But I can assure you that if you give it enough time, you'll figure out that there is indeed common ground to be found there. For example, if we have this King of Wands energy of just like, I know how to do this. I know I can get said thing done. And then another part of us that's afraid and really wants to do a good job. Both of those parts want to do a good job. And so there's some common ground around that. And spending time with each of them about how they want to do that could be helpful. And over time, this is not this is not an instantaneous thing. This is something that comes with consistent reflection and journaling and kind of doing all the things we do here at Blooming Wand is integrate the parts. And I've always felt like working with the tarot has been working with parts. And so that's why it's part of my personal care practices, spiritual practices, all of that stuff is it's helped me identify different parts of myself and be with them and understand them using symbolic imagery and tarot archetypes. It's just been such a profound tool for self-development for me, and it's also developed my intuitive abilities. And so when I give psychic readings, I don't have to use tools anymore, and a lot of that meaning I don't need to use tarot cards or any divination system. I can just get the information psychically. And that's because I've done a lot of parts work. I've done a lot of journaling and intuiting through using symbolic imagery. So just keep in mind that like this integration component and perhaps even the finding common ground component might take a little practice and time. It's actually kind of fun at first. So kind of going back to the first step, identifying our conflicting parts. It can be fun and it can be pretty interesting to find out all the different aspects of who we are and what their needs are. I know that it was very revealing to me to kind of begin to identify different parts of myself and what they needed and what they wanted, and it's been helpful. So integrating the parts, just to close that loop, can help our conflicting parts merge into a more integrated sense of self so they're not in conflict all the time. And you have to trust your inner wisdom to guide this process, and it's not a linear one. It's I think that when we get into using tarot or journaling with the tarot or understanding self-leadership and inner conflict, I really think it's important to point out it's not I sat down one day and I figured it all out. It's a practice. It's like everything that we kind of talk about on the podcast. These are practices. And through consistently showing up for yourself, you will reap the fruits of your labor. It will make it you will gain something from it. Now, by practicing self-leadership, you can foster a sense of inner peace, harmony, and resilience. And I can certainly say that that's been the case for me. Now, qualities of self-leadership, I think I always like to give you guys information because we hear these terms thrown around in the wellness industry and the spiritual communities all the time. But it's like, what the heck are those things and what do they mean? So Qualities of self-leadership would be self-awareness, so understanding your strengths, weaknesses, values, and beliefs. And we talk about this all the time. I can't tell you how many times in a client session I've brought up, like, well, what are your values? Like, what do you value right now at this point in your life? Because our values can change based off of our experiences, things that we've learned, where we're at in our lives, and sometimes our biggest um, values are oriented around just safety and security and getting by in life, and so we align our behaviors towards those kinds of things. But when we're able to move beyond maybe that state or experience having a little bit more time on our hand or more resources, our values might include other things. For example, communication is a value that's really important to me, clear communication, kindness, people who listen. That's just something that I really value. So, self awareness can help us engage self leadership. Another thing that can is intention setting. So clearly defining your current values, needs, and desires. So we create our intentions when we define our values, needs, and desires. So an example of that would be an intention that I hold for myself is that I really want to share with others the things that I've learned about using tools like tarot, psychism, and mediumship in a really practical way. I've used it in a practical way and gained so much from those practices. I know that it's an intention that I hold for myself and for Blooming Wand to educate and empower others in that way. And that's a guiding principle for me. And so I'm aware of that. And so it gives me a focus. It gives me sort of a focal point for my behaviors, for the work that I do, for how I manage my time, and so on and so forth. Another quality of self leadership is consistency. So, developing self discipline and staying focused and motivated. And I know that some people don't resonate with the term self discipline because it does sound restrictive or harsh, but I don't mean it in that way. I just mean consistency. Show up for yourself on a regular basis. So, you know that I show up on every full and new moon and I journal with the tarot cards. Well, guess what? This is my personal care practice that I'm just happen to share with you. And have shown up for years doing these intentions and affirmations. And I have to say, like, wow, I have learned so much from working from the tarot and the moon cycles in this way. And consistency doesn't have to mean you do something every single day. The example I just gave about journaling on the new and full moons, that's a bi-weekly thing, right? And then I kind of sit with what I've written for 2 weeks and reflect on it. And maybe I write more, maybe I don't. But consistency doesn't have to be rigid. It doesn't have to be, oh, I have to do this every day at 5 p.m. or I'm bad and I'm not doing it right. Consistency just means over time I've showed up regularly in the ways that feel right for me and that are in alignment with my needs, desires, and values. Another quality of self leadership is problem solving, so developing strategies to overcome obstacles and challenges. And listen, we all face obstacles and challenges to varying degrees, and sometimes our obstacles and challenges are rooted in day to day life, just like trying to get day to day tasks done. I can relate. Sometimes they're different than that. Sometimes they have to do with finding a job, getting into the school that you want, growing your business, just different things like that. And we have to figure out ways to address the challenges that we face. And that takes some of these other things that we talked about, consistency, intention setting, and self awareness. But we have to be able to look at a problem and find a way to address it that works for us. Now, this is one of my favorite ones. Self leadership, I believe, involves a love of learning. So, finding pleasure in seeking out new knowledge and skills that help you understand yourself and the world around you. So, a love of learning. You never think you know it all, and you're still so curious about what you don't know and what there is to explore without feeling overwhelmed by it. It's just a kind of fun thing. It's like, oh man, I'm learning about this and that and the other, and it feels good. So a love of learning, I feel like, is a core pillar of self-leadership. So this is where I want to take you through kind of a step-by-step guide for addressing conflicting parts and stepping into self-leadership. So it is a step-by-step guide. I'm going to break everything down for you. There are only 4 kind of key steps here with a couple other sub-points, and I'm just going to run through it and we'll see how it works for you. So we've already touched on some of this in the podcast, so some of this will be familiar, which is good. I do that on purpose because we need to hear things several times for it to sink in, or at least I know I do. So step 1 is identify the parts of yourself that are in conflict, which involves noticing the inner conflict, becoming aware of the different voices or perspectives within you, naming the parts. So I always like to give them specific names. Remember how I talked about emo Emily? Perhaps you have a part that you call the worrier, the dreamer, the doer, the achiever. So you want to name them so that you can differentiate them when you're engaging with them. Step 2 is connecting with each part. So imagine a conversation. Pretend you're having a conversation with each of your parts, not at the same time, but like kind of have a conversation with one and then a conversation with the other. Listen to their needs and gain some understanding and insight as to what their motivation, fears, and desires are. I personally like to get out a blank piece of paper and fold it into thirds. And you can do this landscape or portrait, it doesn't really matter. And I use the section on the right to document the perspective of one of my parts, so part A. And then I use the section on the left to document the other part, so part B. And I use the middle to document any ideas, values, needs, or desires that each part shares. I also like to use fine-tipped markers to assign a color to each part. So I might use purple for part A and red for part B. And I kind of ask the parts, like, what color would you choose if you were going to be writing on this paper? And it's funny because a lot of the times they do tell me what color they want to use. Um, and then I want to also add that it's important that when you do this exercise, don't just focus on the troubles that each part has. Be sure to ask each part about their challenges, their joys, their needs, and their desires. So step 3, explore shared goals. Identify any underlying desires or goals that both parts may have. And if you used the folding your paper into 3, you can look at what you've written down for each part and see if there's any similarities. And if you're using the blank paper method I did describe above, use the middle section of your paper and perhaps a new color to document any ideas, values, needs, or desires that your parts share. So this is where the common ground area comes together. And seek compromise. Find ways for the parts to work together towards a shared objective. Trust your inner wisdom and recognize that both parts contribute valuable perspectives. So in a lot of ways, they're both valid, right? Neither one of them is really right or wrong. And when I've done this, it has been tremendously powerful for me to just recognize that each part kind of does share an underlying value that they can both agree on, and that somehow relieves a lot of pressure. Like that in and of itself is extraordinarily helpful. Number 4, validate and soothe. So validate the experiences and emotions that may be driving these parts and let your parts know that they are safe and loved. If you're using markers and a blank piece of paper as described previously in this podcast, you may choose to use a soothing color to write out words of validation and support for each part on your paper in their respective sections. Now remember, this is a process that may take time and practice. Frankly, it will. And it's important to be patient and compassionate with yourself as you navigate these internal dynamics. There's nothing like navigating internal dynamics and getting to know yourself and understanding the push and pull that occurs when we realize that we've got inner conflict happening. And I've always felt that inner conflict has yielded me some of my deepest wisdom and inner knowing and brought me even closer towards my inner guidance system and my intuition and my intuitive self. So, on that note, how's it going? Have you ever experienced inner conflict? If so, what did you do? Personally, I've been working on the parts of me that want to set healthy boundaries and move away from people pleasing tendencies. Like, whoa, I've been working on this for a while. And I'm also working with the parts of me that worry about what people will think and say as I begin to hold true to my needs and boundaries. So there's a part of me that wants to say no sometimes. And then there's another part of me that's like, but people will get mad if you say no. And so, guess who gets to do this exercise, right? I'll be doing it along with you. And you know, I love to hear from you. So, do share how it's going. You can email me at emily@bloomingwand.com anytime and just share your perspective. You know, I love to hear from you. I don't like to operate in a void, and I often do get to hear from many of you after you've listened to the podcast or read the newsletter. Which reminds me, if you would like to get the full and new moon intention and affirmation sent to your email inbox, sign up for the newsletter. You can do so at bloomingwand.com. So, looping back to go over our intention and affirmation one more time, just to make it clear. Here's our intention. Have you ever felt empowered and confident only to become riddled with a sense of inner conflict? Sometimes we feel a pressure to perform, achieve, and accomplish. We know we have the skill and ability to do the things we know we want to do, but inner conflict undermines our sense of surety. And then a sense of mounting pressure arises, and we know if we don't sit with the parts of ourselves that are in conflict, we'll have a meltdown. And just saying this again, I said it at the beginning, it's not a bad thing to have meltdowns. Sometimes we need to have them, so be gentle with yourself. Here's your affirmation. I can hold space for opposing needs and desires. Yes, we can. So get those journals out, take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the full moon.